The wine glasses clinked with strained politeness at our family's monthly brunch in Santa Fe. My Aunt Lenora's adobe estate, a sprawling fusion of rustic charm and opulent excess, had become the usual stage for their favorite tradition, casually dismantling my life choices between courses. "So, Camille," Aunt Lenora's voice was velvet-wrapped sarcasm as she adjusted her turquoise earrings, "still looking for your next move?" I took a calm sip of my sparkling water, watching the housekeeper approach with a tray of Sunday newspapers and early magazine deliveries. My cousin Dean, recently promoted to a junior role in sales at a regional cloud computing firm, couldn't hide the smug curl of his lips. "Actually," I began, but Uncle Ron waved his fork like a gavel. "Lenora, don't coddle her," he said. "The girl's drifting again." He savored a slice of elk tenderloin before adding, "What was it this time? Another startup collapse?" If any of them had skimmed a single tech blog this year, they might have recognized the name Lumencore, a company that had quietly shattered expectations in quantum encryption. But I'd kept myself invisible on purpose, operating under my middle name, Elise, for all public-facing engagements. "The tech world's a gamble," Dean's sister Brooke added, tugging at her silk blouse. "You should have accepted that job at Dean's firm. Sales is safe, structured." Dean nodded, as if he were conferring wisdom. "Wasn't glamorous," he said, "but at least it was real. Tech just isn't for everyone, Camille." I bit my lip to keep from laughing, recalling the email I'd opened that morning, confirming Lumencore's acquisition of 3 regional competitors, including Dean's. "I think your mother's just worried," my uncle added with mock sympathy. 31 and still chasing experiments. That trust fund won't carry you forever." The trust fund they assumed I lived off had long since been funneled into Lumen's seed round. Now it had multiplied into an empire, but they still saw me as the family footnote. "Remember when she turned down Stanford's MBA program?" Aunt Lenora stage whispered. "To code in her guest house of all places." "As if cybersecurity was a proper profession," Brooke said, rolling her eyes. The housekeeper arrived with a silver tray stacked with tomorrow's advance copies of financial publications, Lenora's guilty pleasure. Right on top, Fortune magazine, glossy and face down. Dean leaned back smugly. "Our Q2 numbers just came in. Pretty sure we're in this issue. We're disrupting hard." Aunt Lenora clapped lightly. "Charles, let's see the cover." The housekeeper flipped it. There, in bold serif print, under the headline, "The Silent Force Behind Tech's New Vanguard," was my face. And the byline? "Emile Elise Rivera, CEO of Lumencore." "I love following real business leaders," Aunt Lenora declared. The housekeeper hesitated, her eyes darting to me briefly. I gave her a small nod. She'd known the truth for months, having signed for confidential legal packets and seen the embossed Lumencore seal enough times to put the pieces together. "Of course, ma'am," she said calmly, turning over the Fortune cover with understated flair. The effect was immediate. Aunt Lenora's fork slipped from her hand and clanged against her vintage ceramic plate. Dean coughed into his wine glass. Brooke's mouth fell open. My mother froze mid-sip, her mimosa hovering in the air. There it was, my face, sharp in focus and backlit by digital blue. Under the bold headline, "Camille Elise Rivera, the architect behind quantum security's biggest leap. How a 31-year-old coder quietly built a $60 billion, 0-cents tech giant in the desert." "No mistake," I said lightly, unlocking my phone. "Check page 38. There's a sidebar about our latest strategic acquisitions." I tapped the screen to reveal this morning's news. "Dean," I added, turning the screen toward him, "you might want to read about the one involving your company." The silence that followed was thick with stunned disbelief. "60 billion, my mother whispered, voice barely audible. "Give or take, depending on the markets," I replied, easing back into my chair. "The quantum sector's volatile, but I'm sure Dean can explain that to you once he meets his new executive board on Monday." The housekeeper, ever composed but clearly savoring the shift in tone, began serving dessert. The timing couldn't have been more poetic. Just as the first creme brulee hit the table, every phone in the room vibrated with breaking news alerts. Buzzing. Chiming. Headlines lighting up screens. Aunt Lenora fumbled to read the one flashing on her lock screen. Lumencore acquires 5 rivals in historic merger. Camille Rivera revealed as CEO behind the scenes. Dean, pale now, stared at an email from his company's HR. He looked up, horror dawning. "You're my new boss?" "Not exactly," I smiled. "I'm your boss's boss's boss. Though once tomorrow's restructuring hits, your position will be, let's call it reassessed." "But you've been unemployed," Lenora gasped. "Living in that modest adobe guest house? Driving that plain little hybrid?" "That guest house," I said, folding my napkin, "is actually the private penthouse at Lumen Tower. And the hybrid? A stealth-engineered prototype we're piloting for military contracts. Worth about 5 times more than this estate." Uncle Ron, who had stayed uncharacteristically quiet, finally cleared his throat. "Well," he muttered, "I suppose brunch is on you next time?" "The Rovera Tower." "You named it after yourself?" Aunt Lenora asked, incredulous. "No," I said, setting my glass of water down gently. "I named it after Abuela Rivera." The room shifted. "You remember her, don't you, Uncle Ron? The woman you all said was losing her grip when she sold her land to fund my garage project?" The silence returned with weight. They remembered. They had called my grandmother delusional when she liquidated her real estate holdings and handed me the seed capital for Lumencore. Now her portrait hung in the 60-story Rivera Tower's grand atrium, etched with the words "Vision starts with faith," and the property was worth more than the combined net worth of everyone at the table. Brooke, ever the opportunist, attempted salvage. "Emile, darling, we always believed in you. Remember when I tried to introduce you to that sweet IT guy from my tennis club?" "You mean the one you said could teach me real tech skills?" I pulled up the latest staff directory on my phone. "He works for me now. Junior developer, still learning basic logic trees." My mother's hand shot to her throat, a familiar tell whenever she sensed control slipping. "All those family dinners," she said shakily. "We were just trying to help you find stability." "Highly entertaining," I cut in, smiling, "especially the one where Dean lectured me for an hour about disruption, 2 days after my quantum firewall broke his company's encryption model." The housekeeper returned with coffee and, with subtle flair, placed the morning's Wall Street Journal beside Aunt Lenora. She gasped. "Lumencore's Rivera revolutionizes cybersecurity. The billionaire who operated in total silence." Dean sat slumped, still staring at his HR notice. "I don't get it. How did none of us know? How did you hide it?" I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm. "Because you never bothered to look. You saw what you expected, the dropout niece, the aimless dreamer, the family charity case. While you were offering me sales internships, I was building the infrastructure that protects 5 of the world's biggest banks." My phone buzzed again. I glanced down. Message from my CFO. "Stock up 31%. Net worth increased by $15.20. B. Confirmation from NASDAQ incoming." I showed the screen. Their eyes widened as the numbers sank in, along with every offhand insult they'd ever tossed my way. "Well," I said, standing slowly, "now that we're all caught up, let's talk about why I'm really here." The dining room tensed. I reached into my understated shoulder bag, actually a prototype of Lumen's new flexible graphene display, and pulled out a sleek tablet. A soft hum. A holographic projection bloomed above the table. Phase 2, Lumencore's neural interface. "We're not just advancing AI anymore," I said. "We're changing how human beings connect with technology forever." If you've ever been underestimated by the very people who should have believed in you, don't miss what happens next. Tap subscribe and join me in part 2 as I show them exactly what quiet power looks like. Obsolete? Dean's company, the one he'd bragged about all brunch, was still refining touchscreen UX, while we had already moved years beyond tactile interfaces. "But before the public announcement," I said, watching the pale blue hologram flicker across their stunned faces, "I wanted to offer you all something most CEOs wouldn't. The courtesy of understanding your new roles." Rolls? My mother asked quietly. Yes, I nodded. You see, Abuela Rivera didn't just invest in my garage project. She left behind instructions, very specific ones, regarding how the family would be involved in Lumen Core going forward. I tapped the tablet again. Her notarized will expanded in the air, hovering gently above the table. Each of you has a choice to make. Tonight, Aunt Lenora sat upright, her calculating expression returning, turquoise jewelry catching the holographic light. What kind of choice? She asked. Simple, I said. You can keep your current lifestyle, completely independent from Lumen Core. A graph appeared behind me. The company's soaring valuation, our growth rate, projected earnings. Or, I continued, you can join us, at the bottom, entry-level roles just like I started. Entry-level? Dean stammered. I'm already a junior executive. Where? I corrected. That position was eliminated in the acquisition. What I'm offering now is the chance to earn something real, not something gifted by your last name. The housekeeper, without a word, began handing out sleek folders. Inside, personal reports, their current financial standings, projections, and customized career tracks at Lumen Core. Uncle Ron muttered, eyes widening. These stock options are worth more than your entire net worth, I finished. But only if earned. No shortcuts, no nepotism, no trading on the Rivera name. You'll work. You'll learn. You'll grow. Brooke flipped through hers, visibly panicked. But this says we'd have to relocate to the Montana campus? Yes, I said with a calm smile, where our primary R&D facility operates. No cocktail hours, no social clubs, just innovation, cold winters, and hard work. My mother's hands shook slightly as she held her file. Camille, sweetheart, all those times we were trying to help, you were too busy protecting appearances to see what was actually happening, I said gently, but Abuela saw it. She saw that success isn't built on designer heels or polite applause. It's forged quietly through discipline, vision, and relentless effort. When no one believes in you. I stood slowly, smoothing my deliberately plain dress. An advanced smart fabric prototype monitoring biometric feedback, of course. They hadn't noticed. Not once. You have until midnight to decide, I announced, the blue hue of the holographic display flickering across their stunned faces. Those who choose to join will report to orientation Monday morning. Those who don't? I smiled, thinking of the years of smug comments, polite dismissals, and well-meaning sabotage. You can read about our progress in Fortune magazine. In Dean's company, Aunt Lenora asked, voice tight. What happens to it? It will be fully restructured. The old hierarchy, built on family ties and last names, is done. I glanced around. From here on out, it's merit and innovation. That's all that matters. My phone buzzed again, another market alert. I glanced at the screen and held it up for them to see. Our valuation just spiked another 20%. Word of our neural interface leak got out. They stared at the numbers, processing what they'd lost and what they might still gain. Oh, I added casually, reaching for my minimalist shoulder bag. And Aunt Lenora, that unemployed jab earlier? I paused, letting it land. It just cost you roughly $3 billion, 0 cents in forfeited options. Decisions have consequences. As I stepped out of the estate and into the crisp Santa Fe evening, I heard the chaos begin. Voices rising, accusations flying, regrets thick in the air. I didn't look back. The car that waited for me looked modest, but beneath the matte finish was an AI-powered prototype designed for defense contracts, valued far above anything parked on their cobblestone driveway. I slipped behind the wheel and smiled, remembering Abuela Rivera's final words. Let them underestimate you, mija. There's no sweeter victory than the one they never saw coming. My phone lit up once more with the top headline. Lumen Core unveils neural interface. Unknown billionaire stuns global market. Unknown. Not anymore. I turned onto the highway, not toward the adobe guest house they thought I lived in, but toward Rivera Tower, where my real office crowned the city like a beacon. A a full-floor lab disguised as a penthouse, designed for only one purpose: reshaping the future. Sometimes it just works. Flawlessly. When the time is right. And family dinners? Well, they were about to get a lot more interesting for those who earned their seat at the table. The next morning, I sat in my glass-walled command center, sunlight pouring in across polished stone and circuit-lined panels, watching the decisions roll in. Dean's email arrived at 11:59 p.m. I accept the entry-level position. I finally understand what real innovation means. Attached was a surprisingly sincere letter, a quiet apology. Emma followed minutes later with a predictable caveat. Can I at least keep my social media presence? But of course, the answer was simple. At Lumen Core, silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. Aunt Lenora's response surprised me the most. She didn't accept or decline through email. Instead, she requested a private meeting. The next morning, she arrived at Rivera Tower, Picanto. Without the usual turquoise jewelry, cashmere scarf, or designer heels, just a simple gray suit, flats, and a quiet look in her eyes. I've been thinking all night, she began, standing in my office with an unfamiliar humility, about what your abuela, Catalina, used to say about true worth versus apparent worth. I motioned for her to continue as she walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window. From that height, her adobe estate looked quaint, decorative, almost irrelevant. She tried to tell us, Lenora said, tried to help us see who you were becoming. We were too busy counting invitations and board appointments to see the future staring us in the face. And now? I asked, pulling up her personnel file on my tablet. Now, she said softly, I want to learn. Not for optics, not for the payout, because I finally understand what Catalina saw in you. She saw tomorrow. I studied her a moment, then pressed a button on my desk. Panels slid open silently behind the far wall, revealing an entrance to the core of Lumen Core's most guarded asset, the true headquarters. This was her original investment, I said, a lab built in secret while everyone thought she was remodeling her penthouse. Quantum mainframes, adaptive AI neural clusters, interface implants, and smart matter prototypes glowed within. Lenora's breath caught. Would you like to see what real innovation looks like? I asked, leading her inside. Welcome to the future. Her orientation started that day. My mother chose a different path. A handwritten letter arrived by courier, creased and tear-stained. She didn't want a position. Instead, she asked to establish a foundation in Abuela Catalina's name, one that would fund young dreamers with impossible visions, like I once had. Uncle Ron, of course, declined everything. His pride couldn't stomach a badge labeled Intern R&D Intake. Last I heard, he was trying to launch a competing startup in Texas, unaware that Lumen Core already held every patent his team needed to function. But the true shift wasn't just in career paths. It was in perception. Now, every ordinary car might be a military-grade prototype. Every unused room might house a breakthrough, and every quiet relative they overlooked might be building the future. At the next family gathering, held in my Rivera Tower lab, not Lenora's dining room, the conversations were different. Not status, not gossip. They talked about neural conductivity, AI safety, and the power of starting from scratch. Dean, now 4 months into his coding apprenticeship, approached me with a tired smile. I finally get it, he said. Success isn't about looking impressive. It's about creating something that actually matters. If you've ever been doubted, dismissed, or told to be realistic, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from, and what you've overcome. I read every single one. Your support means more than you know. Subscribe if you believe quiet work can speak loudest. Because the truth is, success doesn't need to shout, it just needs to show up. If someone underestimated you, let that be your fire, not your limit. Keep building, keep believing, because one day, they won't ask what you are doing. They'll ask how you did it.